Hello, it's Stuart, the Unrepentant Atheist. We've got a call here from 2018, and I've picked this one out because I found it interesting. It's quite a long call, but it's a case of a Christian trying to justify their beliefs, and I just thought that it was quite a good case for us to pick our way through. So let's start off and see how it goes.
Yeah, it's very strange. Like in the last 6 months, I have changed my position on a lot of things, and it's I can tell there's a very strong dichotomy between what I believe and what I think I can show, and it's.
I don't think it's a dichotomy. I think he's used the wrong word, but setting that aside, I think what he's trying to say is that he's got beliefs which he can't demonstrate.
It's very strange to me. So
it's a frustrating position to be in when you're convinced of something and yet completely baffled as to how you would show that it's the case.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm just going to guess, but if I were to ask you, why do you believe a God exists? I don't suspect you would have a ready answer. I think it would be.
I mean, that's not just a guess. Well, I would say it's a very, very highly intelligent guess based on much experience.
Be fuzzier than that.
Because I'm avoiding an argument from authority.
You believe because you're avoiding an argument from authority.
That's weird. I wonder how he's going to explain that one.
And essentially, that's how I boil it down. Because if you were to tell me there is no evidence for a globe Earth, I said, okay, I'll take your word on it. That would be intellectually dishonest of me, because the evidence is obvious and abundant. A few thousand years ago, if you were to tell me that, in order to take you at your word, maybe do a little experiment.
Well, it wouldn't be intellectually dishonest. It would be extremely gullible.
Here and there and be like, okay, I believe you. But today...
I apologize, but this seems backward to me.
Yes.
So you believe that there is a God. Are you saying that there's just abundant evidence for God?
Well, that is not an unusual theist position. I'm surprised that Matt's surprised.
No, what I'm saying is I haven't done enough searching for evidence for God to logically conclude that there is no God.
Okay.
Oh, this is getting better.
Or that there is no evidence for God.
So here's the thing. Do you believe in Bigfoot?
No.
Have you spent a lot of time researching Bigfoot?
Not a ton.
Not a ton. I wonder how much that would be exactly, researching Bigfoot. How much evidence is there besides one or two grainy photographs, one film which I think has been completely debunked, and not a lot else really? It's probably would amount to 1 or 2 hours of research at the absolute most.
Have you spent as much time researching Bigfoot as you have God?
No.
So there's a claim that you've spent less time researching and yet you don't accept it. And then there's a claim where you spent more time researching and yet you accept it because you don't think you've spent enough time gathering evidence against it.
That is so beautifully articulated by Matt. Absolutely perfect.
Do you understand that you've essentially shifted the burden of proof from where it should be? Like, if there is a God, that is a proposition which should not be accepted until there's sufficient evidence for it. Instead, there's a proposition and you're accepting it because you haven't found sufficient evidence against it. And if you were going to be consistent, then you should believe in Bigfoot because you haven't found sufficient evidence against Bigfoot, right?
I'll fast forward to the end of the call, as the call is 36 minutes and the middle of the conversation is a bit of a hodgepodge. But to summarize, the caller asserted that God interacts with reality, and Matt asked, what did God do and how do you know he did it? Jacob said that miracles had been performed in the Bible. When asked, how does he know miracles were performed and how does he know it's a God? The caller went into a long explanation about how he listens to YouTube videos for 50 hours a week while he's working, The videos consist of debates, science videos, personal testimonies, and Bible readings. He said that God had spoken to him when he was young about a decision he was about to make, though he admitted this might just be his conscience speaking. He offered no other evidence, but insisted the prior beliefs needed to be falsified to be abandoned. Matt pointed out that this method would lead to holding all unfalsifiable beliefs until death, including the belief, for example, if held, that men are superior to women, and that instead, a better method would be to examine prior beliefs and determine whether one had a good reason for holding them in the first place. The caller admitted he had no good reasons for his beliefs, but held onto them because this is what he'd been taught. This is where we are at the end of the call, so let's see how it concludes.
If you say,
where do I stop?
No. Why should you stop? Nobody's saying you should stop. What I'm saying is, if you have not investigated this enough to conclude that you're wrong, then you cannot have investigated enough to conclude that you're right. You are in no way ever forced to make a decision and make it permanent that I am absolutely convinced that there is a God or I am absolutely convinced that there's not a God. There's no requirement of that. It is, and this is why when I asked, do you actually believe that a God exists? And I didn't get to finish, but the follow-up is, or are you just convinced that it's a good idea for people to profess belief? But at the end of the day, I don't understand how you can say, I just haven't looked into it enough to conclude there's not a God, when that's not the thing that anybody's asking you to conclude. What we're asking you to conclude is that your current conclusion that there is a God is unwarranted.
Or is warranted.
It's like you walked into a courtroom and you're sitting on the jury and you began with a conclusion that the defendant's guilty, rather than starting with presumed innocent. And halfway through the trial, somebody comes along and says, what do you think? And you're like, I think he's guilty, but I haven't really looked into it enough.
It's funny, he's laughing there at the absurdity of that position, and yet that's what he's doing with God.
I mean, is that wrong? Is that not an accurate summary of kind of where we got to?
I don't think it works in this situation. Because I'm starting out.
Yeah, well, this is the old special pleading argument.
But that's going from the argument of ignorance fallacy, that's special pleading, that this particular belief or proposition is somehow special and warrants different treatment than, is the sun going to rise tomorrow?
I tell you what, there's a bunch of callers, Jacob, and I appreciate your time and everything, but I want to move on to some other stuff. So think about that. We never want somebody to call in and then just beat them up and blah, 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 and they got no answers. And that is not the purpose of this.
The reason I called is to learn.
Yeah. And so think on those things, process those, come back with more and better or different questions. Anything that's going to help the process learn. You're welcome to call back, but I am going to move on to some other callers.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Too bad. I wish they could have talked about morality instead.
Well,
I didn't play the beginning of the call. He did actually call in to talk about morality, and he started off with the statement that, in his view, morality is divorced from God. Matt, of course, agreed with that, and he said the only difference between them is the God part, and then he immediately steered it onto, let's deal with the God part first before we get to morality, and it led to, that 36-minute exchange. And he comes at the end and says, I wish I could have talked about morality. I'm delighted that Matt did that. I've seen situations where other hosts have been on, and they would have entertained him talking about morality for 30 minutes when really first you've got to deal with the fundamentals, and if your worldview is determined by belief in the existence of God, then obviously that's going to impact on your views on morality as well. So best first of all to deal with God and then morality, which is why Matt did what he did, and I'm glad he did it. I'm also glad that the caller said at the end that he called in to learn. I think that's a that's a positive thing, and hopefully he will reevaluate his position. In the past, I've actually seen somebody called in a few years ago with an absolutely unbelievable epistemological position, that they start off with believing that everything is true. All claims are true until falsified. That was absolutely unbelievable. I'll have to try and find that call, because the way that call went was just, that also lasted about 30 minutes. So I'll try and find it. But anyway, that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed that clip, and I'll be back again soon with another call. Bye for now.